Hello, it's your friendly neighborhood pop culture princess coming at ya with a very new segment that I hope I can do consistently every month. This is exactly the sort of content I have wanted to make ever since I discovered BookTube back in 2017. And it took me 8 years to get here because life is one logistical challenge after another. But all that matters is that I'm finally here and I'm doing this. This is heavily inspired by Poland Banana's books, Stories I Ate This Month, videos from back in the day. She is my all time favorite YouTuber, and I have looked up to her ever since I discovered BookTube for the very first time. Her most recent book is also a part of this video, and I just wanted to acknowledge her and give her the credit for inspiring this segment. So the categories for this month are books and movies slash series. I've already made an Instagram post on Camp Half Blood India, my Instagram page, so you can check that out as well. I'll link it in the description down below. I read 2.5 books this month, watched 4 movies, and 1 season of a series. The first book I read this month is The Code of the Dead by Rick Riordan and Mark Oshiro. I have it right here. I don't know if it's visible on camera. I hope it's in frame. And I gave it 5 stars. This is the sequel to The Sun and the Star, which is on my shelves back here. I think you should be able to spot it. It's probably on the side. And both this book and The Sun and the Star are set in the Percy Jackson universe of Greek and Roman mythology. I'm a huge Percy Jackson fan, if it wasn't already evident from the bookshelf behind me. And just Camp Half Blood India, but yeah, I'm a huge Percy Jackson fan and I love the universe. So I try to keep up with all the books that Rick Riordan writes. This one follows Nico, the demigod son of Hades, and his boyfriend Will, the demigod son of Apollo, as they spend time at the Roman camp Jupiter helping Hazel, Nico's Roman half sister, who's also on the cover. Yay! I'm not spoiling anything. I'll just talk about what is already mentioned in the synopsis of the book. So Nico and Will, or Solangelo as we call them, are called to Camp Jupiter by Hazel because she, as a demigod and the praetor of Camp Jupiter, is providing sanctuary to monsters who have been at odds with demigods and have fought them since the dawn of time. So we witness the hostility from the demigods towards the monsters and vice versa. But over the course of the book, the monsters start disappearing. And again, this was also in the synopsis of the book, so I'm not spoiling anything. But the monsters start disappearing because they're getting kidnapped one by one, and the demigods have to come together to protect them and rescue them, which, spoiler alert, they do. They do make amends. Make amends, come to terms, say whatever you will. I gave this book a 5 star rating because, like I previously mentioned, I love everything Rick Riordan writes, and fans have been asking for Solangelo books for so long because Solangelo is the most beloved PGO ship after Persabeth. And I think these two books have that Uncle Rick humor that we love so much, along with action and adventure and twists and turns. It is funny and entertaining and kept me hooked. This is a small spoiler, but I love Will's mom's cameo and her character on the whole. She's literally so cute and so cool. Like, she's so wholesome. I adore her and I aspire to be her. Some other lovely things about the book that I really appreciate are how characters' mental health struggles are expressed. Nico expresses his troubles throughout the book, and even, like, we talked about a lot of deep mental health stuff in the first book as well. But yeah, Nico expresses his emotions and his troubles throughout the book and helps other people regulate, come to terms with loss and grief, and it's fantastic. It's genuinely amazing. It's a breath of fresh air. It's very different from the OG books, and I think even Heroes of Olympus, although it's been quite a while since I read those books, but still, yeah, we didn't talk about these things in the OG books and the older books, and I think it's great that, especially because these things and these emotions and grief and loss are so integral and so central to Nico's character, his entire story, his entire arc. So I'm really glad he's able to talk about them and express them, and we get to see him help other people with their grief and their loss as well. I think that's fantastic. Rick's writing has matured so much over the course of the years, and so have his characters. And it's such an amazing experience to witness it when I read the new books. But it's also amazing how growth and change is inculcated as a theme within the books as well, like these books, the new ones, and the Solangelo ones. The monsters seek asylum at Camp Jupiter because they no longer feel like terrorizing humans and demigods is what they want to do. They no longer feel like that's their calling and that's something that makes them happy. They didn't want to do anyone else's bidding. They didn't want to serve any evil deities, looking to outsource their dirty work. So they left Tartarus and decided to make a life for themselves in the mortal world. Both the demigods and the monsters mature throughout the course of the book and go from being very hostile at the beginning of the book to being on good, friendly terms by the end of it. It was also amazing to see Frank and Hazel after so long, or should I say, amazing to see Frank and Hazel after so long. And that also contributed to making the book a fantastic 5-star read. Talking about read, this is such an interesting segue into the next book, which is 30, Flirty, and Forever Alone. I do not, unfortunately, have a physical copy of it. I read it as an audiobook, and yeah, I regret not having a physical book. I hope I can get a physical book copy soon and reread it and annotate the hell out of it. I love the book so much. So 30, Flirty, and Forever Alone, or Tafafa, as Christine calls it, is a fantastic adult rom-com by Christine Riccio, and I loved every single second of the audiobook. I was hooked. Like, I was hooked. I did not want to do anything else. I literally dropped all the other things I was supposed to do to read the audiobook. And I did not want to stop listening to the book, stop consuming this wonderful, beautiful, stunning masterpiece of a book that is so funny and witty and magical and whimsical. Christine, oh my god, ma'am. She blessed us with this book. It was amazing. I really don't think any amount of praise can do this book justice, but I shall try my best. This is also obviously simply my own personal, subjective opinion of the book, and if someone watching has read it or ends up reading it and not liking it, that's okay too. But this is going to be me ranting about how lovely I found it. The book follows Ricky, 30, flirty, and almost convinced, basically convinced, pretty much convinced. She is cursed to be forever alone because of her failed relationships and bad dating experience. Also, her name literally means forever alone in some Nordic language, if I'm not wrong. But, anyways, despite how hard she has tried, she has not been able to find the person, her person. And then she bumps into the most perfect guy to ever exist, Reed. Now you get my read segue. Me talking to the voices in my own head. Anyways, they have instant chemistry. The banter is fantastic. The vibes are top notch. Even though the vibes are top notch, they live very far apart on opposite coasts in the States. But fate brings them together again and again, and they end up meeting a couple of times. They end up having a bunch of encounters, as our main character has dubbed them, yearning for each other for the rest of the book. And everything that can go wrong does go wrong all at once. Right as I was hoping for no third act breakup, I was just like, oh my god, I hope there's no third act breakup because I'm one of those people who doesn't like third act breakups. Deal with it. And then I was like, oh my god, I hope there's no third act breakup. And then Christine just pressed the button for the nuke, and all of the nukes went off. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong at the same time. But yes, that's what I get for hoping there's no third act breakup. Also, I've already read Again But Better and Better Together, so I should have known. But despite myself and despite knowing Christine's writing, I was like, oh, maybe there's not going to be any third act breakup. But anyways, Christine wove the story so skillfully. My close personal friend Christine, I'm referring to her as if She's literally someone I know and I'm besties with. But anyways, my close personal friend Christine wrote the story so skillfully, and honestly, I have like 48 pages of notes. Not even like, I literally have 48 pages of notes that I made while listening to the audiobook, and even the dots I connected afterwards. But I want to make a whole separate video dedicated to the book, talking about it in depth. So for now, I'll just say, drum roll please. I love the characters, the dynamics, the dialogue, the Disney magic, the cameos. Oh my god, the cameos. I literally just reread again but better, and by just I mean like back in November, and I made 70 plus pages of notes for that as well. So for the cameos, let's go, let's go, let's go. I am not going to be able to do justice to the book, but let's go. That's all I have to say. The Magic Journal, Ricky and Reed's brain coupling. If you read the book, you know, and if by chance it's Christine watching the video, of course she knows what I mean. Literally everything about this book is fantastic, jaw-dropping, stunning. Every single beautiful adjective in the history of adjectives in the Oxford Dictionary. I'm sorry, I'm just not able to articulate how much this book means to me and how much I like it, how much I love it, how much I adore it. And it has definitely become one of my favorite pieces of media of all time. And I love you, Christine. Thank you so much for this. And I think about the book and the characters almost on a daily basis, and I want to get a physical copy, like I've already said, and reread it again. 500 million stars. Let's go. Okay, moving on to the next book that I read. This is the half book. Never Logged Out: How the Internet Created India's Gen Z by Ria Chopra, or Ria Chops. I just refer to her as Ria Chops because that's her username on Instagram. Again, my close personal friend Ria.
Hello, I am Ria Chopra and this is my book Never Logged Out, which releases on the 2nd of December. This is not my book, this is just the manuscript. You will be able to get the book in stores or online on the 2nd, so pre-order my book now. I've already made her read a little bit of it. People who came here today got a sneak peek of the book, but make sure you get it and read the whole thing too.
That was the manuscript of her book, and we got some sneak peeks. She basically told us all the chapters and like showed us the name of the chapter titles, and it was amazing. But now I have the finished copy in my hands, and I went to get signed by her. So I met her a third time, and I went to get it signed by her. It says, "Dear Vega, thank you for always engaging so deeply with my work." Okay, I'm just gonna read out the blurb on the back of the book because I think that explains it very well. One day we logged onto the internet and then we never logged out. On 15th August 1995, India officially logged onto the internet. If you're a young Indian today, you come from a generation that used to dream of the endless possibilities that come with having the world at our fingertips. And now we must cope with its realities. India's Gen Z is inextricably tied to the internet, connected in more ways than one. To understand one, you must understand the other. From the quiet potential of the early internet to Bollywood's clumsy depictions of youth culture, from tote bags and trending aesthetics to anonymous hate and viral fame, from Ask FM to AI, Never Logged Out by extremely online Gen Z writer Ria Chopra tries to make sense of our generation and how they love, shop, and live on the internet. In 8 essays, each posing questions about selfhood, love, memory, privacy, anonymity, knowledge, fame, and ambition, Never Logged Out interrogates how the internet makes and breaks this generation. Fresh, funny, and startlingly insightful, Dia weaves together personal anecdotes, cultural commentary, and a sharp understanding of a generation in the world today into a first of its kind book about the experience of growing up on, with, and because of the Indian internet. It's about growing up on the internet and having experienced a time when the internet was just a place where we would log in and then we would log out. It wasn't omnipresent, it wasn't constantly at our fingertips in the palm of our hand at any given point of day. You would have to log in and log out. But one day we logged in and never logged out. I'm a couple years younger than Ria. Yeah, and even I remember when the internet just used to be a place, was just the family computer, just the desktop. And now times are so different. It's scary. It's scary and it's beautiful and it's wonderful, but it's also quite scary. But anyways, I want to make a separate video about this one as well. Even though I haven't read the entire thing yet, I really regret not having read the entire thing yet. Um, it is a collection of 8 essays, and I have only read 4, but I love it so much. I absolutely adore the chapter on love and dating, and I talked to her about it when I got the book signed. I told her how much I loved reading it, and she also, I think she seemed quite happy and pleased with herself, and it was just a very wholesome interaction. And these are just like some notes I made in my book while I was reading it. So I said, "Oh, this is the sort of analysis I love because Jayati ma'am does it in class." That's a completely different tangent as well. And I feel like if I start talking about this prof of mine, I'm just not gonna stop. Love you. But yes, so yeah, that's Ria's analysis and her book and her writing also really reminded me of this one class and this one prof I have, and the analysis we do in her classes, or we used to do in her classes. Very sad. She's not taking theory classes anymore. But yes, analysis, introspection, looking within, dissecting, looking at the roots, realizing everything is not what it seems, in reference to the orange peel test as well from the second book. I love love, and I love the second chapter. I agree with the quote unquote define love for yourself, look within, transmit the power of love, etc. I was so happy I knew the poem that she referenced in the love chapter, and I love how the orange was a central figure, a theme that the whole thing revolved around. That's just fantastic. I feel like even if you don't read the entire book, do try to get your hands on the second chapter, which is about love. I think it's called Eternal Sunshine. Yeah, even her chapter titles are very creative. No, it's called It's Complicated. Sorry, the second chapter is called It's Complicated. Eternal Sunshine is the fourth chapter, which is the last one I read. I think that's why I remembered it. It's complicated. It's fantastic. So my favorite part of the chapter, and the reason why I love it as much as I do, is the orange connection she makes. She talks about how one says like my better half, my soulmate, my loved one in Spanish, and how it literally translates to like one half of an orange, because like, and it makes sense to use it for loved ones or soulmates or better halves, because no two orange halves are the same and are gonna connect and are gonna be like symmetrical. So one half of an orange will only be made complete by the other half of the same orange and not by some other orange. I think it's a little hard to explain it, but I think you know what I mean, and I think you should read the chapter to understand it better. And then she goes on to talk about the orange peel test, or if you hand your loved one an orange and ask them to peel it for you, what are they going to do, what does that say about your relationship and them, and etc etc. And then she like started talking about love, and it's complicated, and dating in the era of the internet, dating on the internet. And then finally she starts talking about oranges again towards the end of the chapter. And then she talks about, yeah, The Orange by Wendy Cope. And I was so glad I knew the poem, and it was just so fun to see her reference it. And then she talks about that poem. I think I should just actually read this out. So she's talking about how oranges are the perfect picnic fruit and she loves going on picnic. But the very last paragraph is, no, this is the second last paragraph, sorry. Whenever we share an orange in the greens of Lodi Garden, I invariably think of the orange, Wendy Cope's Ode to the Fruit. Please read it if you haven't already. At lunchtime, I bought a huge orange. The size of it made us all laugh. Cope begins detailing how she shares the fruit with her friends. The act of sharing the orange and other ordinary things gives her so much happiness that the poem ends with the most simple, beautifully evocative last lines. I love you. I'm glad I exist. I have eaten many oranges in that specific spot, our favorite spot in Lodi Garden. For the life of me, I could not tell you who peels them. Neither one of us asks the other to do it, but the orange somehow ends up neatly peeled anyway. Was it me? Was it him? Me Media Naranja. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Or I maybe that's a very, very desi Indian Punjabi way of pronouncing it. I don't know. Me Media Naranja. Maybe it was the both of us doing our house of the task together. And this was the line she was talking about in the beginning of the chapter. When we are together, it does not matter who peels them. What matters is that we are together. When we are together, I'm glad I exist. And it's just beautiful. It's just so beautiful. And absolute cinema, absolute elegance. Many banger quotes from this book. The chapter titles are very clever. The entire book is very well researched, and I love Ria's sexy brain so much. Her ideas and the way she articulates them is just so awe-inspiring for me. I really, really admire her and her work. Banger book, at least the half of it I actually did read. 5 stars. Now onto the movie segment. I watched 4 movies in January, all 4 with my sister Thea. We watched Wake Up Dead Man because I hadn't watched it, and she loves it, and she wanted me to watch it. It was nice. I like all the Knives Out movies, and I kind of guessed who was the murderer in this one, but it was still fun to watch and witness Benoit Blanc at work in action. Very well made. Loved everyone's performances. I'm not a murder mystery person, and this is not a genre I consume like at all. I ever choose to consume in any medium. But I am morbidly curious by temperament, so it's fun whenever I do end up consuming it. Usually because of Thea or because of my parents, because either Thea has forced me to watch a movie or my parents are watching something in the murder mystery genre. And again, because of morbid curiosity, I also sit down and watch it with them, even though I have 100 million other things to do. Never mind. 5 stars. Cruella. Then we watched Cruella. I had watched it when it came out back in 2021, but Thea had never watched it, and I had been wanting to rewatch it. So we watched Cruella, starring Emma Stone, and it was great. I love the vibes. I love how this Cruella is not really like an evil Cruella. She's not an evil villain. She's got the villainous streak, and she's feisty, and she's rebellious, and she's not gonna take shit from anybody. But she's not like evil, and it's the Baroness who's actually evil. Someone who's genuinely cruel in every sense of the word, and who hates people and them when she feels threatened by them in any capacity. I like the movie. I like the characters. All the actors delivered. The costumes were stunning. It did feel like a Disney movie at times, and I don't know like any other way to explain it. Like a little silly, a little goofy, a little like it did seem like a little quote unquote unrealistic. Maybe I don't know. Like it seemed like a Disney movie with the magic and the things being over the top and dramatic and stuff like that, but it didn't take away from the experience of watching the movie. I love Disney movies, so I like silly, unserious scenes and dialogues. I like the movie. 5 stars. After that, Thea and I watched Zootopia, which I had not watched in years. I think the last time I watched it was like in 2017, 2018. So I remembered literally next to nothing from it. So it was like a fresh slate, bilkul blank. Yeah, I was just completely blank and I did not remember any. And it was amazing. I loved the movie. The animation is amazing. The plot is amazing. I love Judy and I want to give her the biggest hug ever. She's just so cute and so adorable. And I don't mean it like to infantilize her in any way, I'm sorry, but she is quite cute. And I just feel like she needs the support. She needs the moral support. Someone to say that I'm here with you. And I think she's a little type A. I think she's very type A actually. And I just want to give her a hug and tell her that it's okay to be type A and it's okay. And everything is gonna be okay. I don't know. I just feel like I just want to hug her. I cannot explain it. But I think people who've seen the movie or who know anything about it can understand what I mean by that. So I don't really need to over explain myself. And I will admit Nick is hot. I get what everyone has been talking about. I think it's whatever the hell he does with his eyes. His eyes are hooded most of the times, and he has like a smirk on his face. Yeah, I get it. He's hot. So I gave the movie 5 stars, and then we also watched the second one because it came out sometime last year, and both of us were like curious about what happens in the second one, and we wanted to consume more of Zootopia and more of the world of Zootopia. So we watched it, but both of us felt that it wasn't as good as the first one. I liked that Andy Samberg and Ki Hui Kwan, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Ki Hui Kwan, voiced characters, and even the plot is interesting, with Land of the Reptiles being erased and the evil expansionist cats. Those cats were really scary. Like throughout the movie I kept telling Thea like those cats, it's like it is an animation but those cats look really scary. But yeah, it just didn't hit. Thea also predicted the betrayal. If you know, you know. Even though it was funny and heart touching and emotional with some fantastic endearing characters, it wasn't as good as the first one. Like I cannot even explain why. I think this is like my millionth time saying I cannot even explain why. But I cannot. Okay, I cannot explain why. The more I do these videos, maybe the better I'm gonna get at explaining weird things. But yeah, I cannot explain it. But it just wasn't as good as the first one. It just didn't hit like the first one did. The thing is, why must we make a sequel or a spin off or a series out of every single piece of media in existence? Why must capitalism ruin everything? Why? Okay, anyways, enough with the ranting. What am I saying? The ranting has just begun. I'm sorry if I'm a little loopy. I am sick and it's almost 1 a.m. in the morning, and I've delayed filming this video for so long. It's literally the 18th of February, and this is media I consumed in January. But anyways, so I'm sorry if I make mistakes and just sound very loopy and crazy in this video. Finally, Spy Family! I love Spy Family so much. I reread all the manga in December itself. Like, literally, it was my final exams for the semester going on, and I would just be reading the Spy Family manga. I reread the manga in December, but I had not watched the third season of the anime, which came out sometime last year in 2025. So I'd been meaning to rewatch the first two seasons and then proceed with the third one. I mean, I don't even know where to start because there is so much I love about it and so much I want to say. But again, I cannot do justice. I don't have the words. I'm not articulate enough. I'm not eloquent enough. And I'm also sick AF and loopy. But I will save the long rant for another video that I can dedicate just to Spy Family. So far I've said I want to make a separate video on Tafafa, on Never Logged Out, and on Spy Family. Let's go. Let's see if I can pull it off. I just have too much college work. I'll just say that it's a fantastic piece of media. Fantastic, jaw-dropping, stunning, ingenious. I'm genuinely so happy that it exists and that I exist at the same time as it, and I get to read the manga and watch the anime and consume the wonderful, intricate story about spies and assassins and the cutest little telepath and a dog who can see the future. LMAO. Even explaining the lore right now would like end up making this video too long. I love the story so much, and I know there are people who dismiss it as silly or childish or not serious enough, blah blah blah. But there are always multiple layers of analysis. Take it from a psychology student, there's always multiple layers of analysis. Actually, like, sure, one can simply take it at face value as a silly, goofy, jovial story. But as we progress in the manga and in the anime, we find out it's actually quite serious and deals with some pretty heavy, serious topics like war and the grief and loss and devastation caused by it. Again, there is so much I want to say, but I'm gonna save that for my Spy Family video that I will hopefully make in the near future. But yes, fantastic show. I love the intro and outro, and I'm just specifically talking about season one, but I have also rewatched season two, and then I watched season three as well because I just could not get enough of it because I'm obsessed. I just want pieces of media to sink their claws so deep into me, and I want to sink my claws into these pieces of media. And yes, this is what I was meant to do. I was meant to fangirl, I was meant to read and consume media and talk about it and yap about it on the internet and to people offline as well. This is my calling, okay? This is my purpose. This is my professional aspiration in life. But anyways, let's not digress. Let's come back. We have already digressed, but let's come back. So yes, I love the intro and the outro. I love Comedy by Gen Hoshino, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly as well. Gen Hoshino. It transports me to 2022 when the first season had come out and the song was also trending on social media. I also remember Bangchan Chani from Stray Kids playing it on Chan's room, and I was just so happy. It was just like two worlds colliding. It's just so joyful and so happy and warm and comforting. At least to me, again, that's just my personal opinion. Other people are free to feel whatever they want to. I love the Forgers, I love Lloyd, I love Anya and Yor so much. These characters mean the world to me. Even though I feel like Lloyd is way more handsome in the manga, I still love the anime. I don't know, I feel like the anime doesn't do him justice. He's like super duper hot in the manga, but anyways. 5 out of 5 stars. A 5 bajillion out of 5 stars. One of my favorite pieces of media of all time. Again, I don't want to make this video too long, but I do have one last thing to say related to Lloyd and hot and handsome and blah blah blah. I love Jason Grace. Again, say what you will about Jason. If you hate him, get out of here. If you don't like Jason, get out of here. I don't even want to listen. I don't even want to hear it. I love Jason. Again, from the Percy Jackson universe, from Heroes of Olympus. He has short blonde hair and he wears glasses. And Lloyd, I feel like, kind of looks like him, and also like Steve Rogers, MCU Steve Rogers, and I love MCU Steve Rogers, and I love Jason, and I love Lloyd, and also Chani right now has short blonde hair, and he also wears those like chrome hearts glasses sometimes, and it's like, and Jason also wears glasses, and Lloyd wears glasses sometimes. Steve never wore glasses, but like still, so it's like, do you see the pattern here? It's insane. It's actually kind of insane. I mean, short blonde hair and glasses, like, not that big of a deal, but like, it's just a pattern that I've noticed. That Chan right now has short blonde hair and frequently wears glasses at airports and stuff. Even his like other Jason, I feel like I've seen a lot of fan art of him with like rimless glasses, rimless rectangular glasses, and I've seen Chani also wearing them at airports, rimless rectangular glasses. And then Lloyd wears glasses sometimes, but the short blonde hair. And then Steve, and even I noticed parallels between Steve and Lloyd in Code White as well, which I watched back when it came out on Netflix, I think last year, and then I rewatched it just a couple days ago. And I noticed towards the very end there are some parallels between MCU Steve and Lloyd. And I'm gonna talk about that in my February video, but I just want to talk about that. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for bearing with my sick, completely out of it, very loopy ass. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you like it, and even if you don't, I mean, what can I do? That's your opinion. You're entitled to your own opinion. But yes, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.